This podcast is brought to you by Spirits and Distilling for those who make and drink great spirits. Join our free email newsletter for technical and creative distilling stories in your inbox every week. Learn more at spiritsanddistilling.com.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Craft Spirits and Distilling podcast. I am Sydney Jones. This is episode number 14 of the season, episode number 36 in total. And I am so excited to say who I have as my guest today, because this is someone who, if you listen to the episodes that I do, always comes up in conversations with other people. And we finally got him, guys. We finally got him on the show. Todd Leopold is here with me today. He is founder, distiller, that guy, the man at Leopold Brothers in Denver, Colorado, one of my most favorite distilleries of all time, and a very dear friend of mine who I absolutely adore. So before we get into talking about all sorts of fun Leopold Brothers things with Todd, a quick reminder for you, as always, that G&D Chillers understands that each distillery's chilling requirements are unique. On every distillery project, G&D offers the front-end design and engineering your team needs at no cost to you. Hank Presley, head distiller at Moondrop Distillery, says, "Early on, we made a decision to partner with quality American-made companies. One of those companies was G&D Chillers, and we are proud of that choice. Our equipment from them has run long and strong. We put our first barrel in our rickhouse in September 2021, and over the past 3 years, we have put back more than 540 barrels. What a great decision to team up with a company like G&D Chillers. Reach out for a quote today at gdchillers.com. Hi, Todd.
Hello. Chillers for the win. It's good of them to sponsor and to muck in for discussions about distilling, so good on them.
I have so many horror stories in my career of having subpar chillers that don't work correctly, or they are undersized, and the headaches that they gave me. It is so important. Chillers are like up there on the top of your list of things that you need when building out a new facility or retrofitting one.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And of course, it's a big deal for water usage, that you're not running your condensers on city water and you're, recircing it. And yeah, it was, but part of it too is you wish you didn't have to have them. But simply because they're mechanical, they break, just like everything else. And we're ours now, I guess, about 10 years old. And, we take maintenance on that thing real seriously. We're one of those places where, our condensers get chilled 24 hours a day. There is no off. We put the shut off and bypasses up 20 feet in the air. So you can't, whoops, I forgot to turn it on. Mm-hmm. And it's one of those things where you just try to idiot proof the distillery wherever you can, because we can all be idiots and never underestimate how dumb us idiots can be. So we try to simplify it as much as possible. When you find a company that's reliable and, of course, American made, that's a good thing. So
yeah. 1,000%. So Todd, again, cannot thank you enough for coming on today. For those who might be tuning in who are not familiar with the wonder that is Leopold Brothers, could you give us the elevator pitch on who you are, where Leopold Brothers started, and some of the pioneering things that you've done? I know that's a loaded question, but
well, let's see. We're in our 26th year. My brother got his master's from Stanford in environmental engineering. And since you're recording in Chicago, he went to Northwestern for his undergrads in industrial engineering and economics. So as you can imagine, he accidentally trained to how to run a factory, which is incredibly helpful, obviously. It's
so helpful. Oh,
yeah. It's a bit of we like to call him a howitzer when everybody else gets a fly swatter. He should really be running Brown-Forman or Diageo or something like that, and he's just stuck with me. So, again, speaking of Chicago, I went to the Siebel Institute in 1995, and then Doman's after that in 96. Did apprentice work in breweries over there, and then opened up a brew pub in Ann Arbor, Michigan in 1999. We made unfiltered lagers, which, as I like to say, was so wildly successful that I'm not making them anymore.
So to say that's a controversial move.
Oh, yeah. Picture 1999, and I was stubborn, and I did the 3-minute pour because, of course, I saw that in Germany, and it's so beautiful and elegant, and it looks like ice cream, coming off. But, the way that you do that is your carbonation is higher than normal. You chill the keg room down so that the CO2 and the temperature of it is perfect after you've spent the time pouring the beer, which really doesn't take 3 minutes. It takes 5, but it sounds good in the German brochures. We added distillation in 2001. Just because the beer wasn't working, people didn't get it. We could only sell beer there, and the only way to add spirits was to do distillation. So, I did Alltech's class. That was, I think, a week or 2 weeks or something like that, which turned out to be incredibly fortuitous in the sense that, well, first of all, the entire Siebel teaching team, Anna McLeod, Chris Bird, Zwiatkowski there. I'm sorry, just a bunch of well-known professors that were at Siebel in the 80s and 90s had all migrated over to Alltech, and they all said the pay's better. I'm like, oh, okay. I guess that explains that. But at the time, Alltech, it was like 300 students or something, or 200. I can't remember what the number was. It was a big class, but like 90% of it. But 90% of it was for fuel ethanol.
That explains it.
So a lot of it was utterly useless. So they would do things that were unthinkable, like they in a fuel ethanol plant, they will clean their tanks with caustic and then not get rid of the chemicals because why? And
no one's drinking it.
And then and then run the stills. And I'm like, well, Jesus, I never thought of that. And it's when I got to learn, bacteria counts where I thought that they were off exponentially. I'm like, did you forget to carry the one a couple times? Like, what's acceptable for lactobacillus? And of course, what they're talking about, which to me is incomprehensible. Having a lactobacillus infection is so bad you're losing yield. But that's common for a fuel. But anyways, the best part was there were 5 rum distilleries from the Caribbean, including the master blender at Hampton Estates. So I, of course, learned real quick to take them out to lunch and dinner and I want to hear about these production methods. So that's really what I got out of that. And finished up and went back to Austria and Germany. Still had some nice connections from brewing school. And so the first distillates I ever ran or tasted were eau de vies. Which was wonderful because, of course, with Siebel, not anymore. I'm dating myself. Siebel used to be half malting and half brewing. So you're sitting there talking about barley and malting for months. The weeks and weeks are going by before you get anywhere close to a mash tun. It was, I thought it was crazy. And so did the younger brewers at the time. Because there were only a handful of us that were working in smaller breweries. It was still Coors, Bud, Heineken, Asahi, Molson. Corporate brewer for Molson was in my class. The head of lab services at Labatt's. Gary Stroh the fourth was in my class, and so was the head of lab services at Coors, their chief taste tester. So, but it was the old school places like Full Sail, Old Dominion. Trying to think who else. Deschutes were in the class, and so we didn't understand. We didn't understand that you needed to understand how to make malt to make good beer, because of course a lot of these breweries still malted. Budweiser, Miller, Coors, obviously, or at least back then they did. But anyways, got my hands made eau de vie, Kirsch, Quince, Quitta. All these things you can't possibly sell. And then we opened up the distillery there in Ann Arbor. We never sold our spirits in Michigan. we just used as a base. So the tasting room was paying the bills and we were sending our stuff. Their biggest markets were London and San Francisco for years and years and years, because it was the only place where we could get a distributor. And it was the only place where they got what we were trying to do.
Yeah.
So I've gotten notes from, distillers in London, because at the time there weren't any distilleries in London in 2001 when we released our gin. But to kind of go through the first hand numbered batch of gin, vodka. That was the first time that had ever been done. We did the first American Amaro. Since Prohibition, you always have to throw that caveat in, because who the hell knows?
Who the hell knows? We've lost so much information. Yeah, it's a black hole.
Yeah, first Amaro. We did the first Fairnet, first American Maraschino. We revived the Maryland Rye. So if you've ever seen anybody write up what Maryland Rye is, that's a younger Todd writing up that copy. I did that with the idea of giving distillers and consumers someplace to meet, right? So in other words, now the closest thing I can think of now that's kind of for that is like either a peated whiskey, right? That's some place to live on the back bar or on a menu, or a high rye bourbon. My idea was to make it so that people would understand you're pulling back on the spice and leaning into the fruit and the floral. For that one, first aperitivo. Yeah, you get the idea. We've kind of made a little bit of everything over the years, and part of it is because I can't imagine making the same thing over and over again. That would bore me to tears, and I got into this business to be creative and to make new things, and kind of the irony, or I don't know if it's irony, dealing with the market changes post-COVID. We've kind of evolved to where we started, where we're making so many different things and in smaller amounts, and taking advantage of how lucky we are to have a kind of a cult following where they want us to make things that are new. They want us to make different things, and so of course, me and the crew are overjoyed. You want Pear Eau de Vie? Cool. Now, of course, on the flip side of it is I have to make my brother happy and sell it out. But we sold our Eau de Vie out in 7 months, which I was just over the moon thrilled. As I was announcing it on my Facebook page, Henry Price, the importer, and some other Eau de Vie producers are kind of chiming in and saying, well, we hope you can kind of pull this, a little bit further. So they knew what I knew, which is good luck selling this, kid. And so I was overjoyed that we were actually able to pull through it. But all of those things are being made. The fruit brandies in particular are being made on the chamber still. And as we've gotten more work with Noah Rothbaum and David Wondrich and thank you, Nicole Austin. There are a few things nicer than having somebody give you, here's two world-class historians that Leopold Brothers can't afford to hire, but Nicole can. Finding out that the chamber still was used for so many things, and in the Midwest in particular, they were using it to make pear and apple. Those are the two that I have direct evidence that they were using it. And of course, as I started to find that out. Now, of course, we're going to kind of be jumping around, I guess, because this is how my mind works. We installed the 3 chambers still with the idea of running rye whiskey in it. And so when we decided, okay, well, I'd like to run fruit in it, but is fruit going to behave the same way in terms of the valves, in terms of the pumps, in terms of the... And so I had to... I'm
picturing clogs and plugs, and I'm picturing a 14-hour clean-out day. Yep. Mm-hmm.
The things that us distillers have to worry about is all of it. It's why we're not the same thing as a blender. Because
we deal with the physical mess of the substrate.
It's a whole nother blender is, step 100 out of, 99 other things that the blenders don't know how to do. Now, I have nothing but respect for blenders, but It's a whole nother can of worms when you're a distiller, which is why I adore talking to all of you, because we've all dealt with the breakdowns at 2:00 in the morning where you're kind of staring at this going, okay, what the hell do I do now? But I brought Danny
trauma.
in.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Shared trauma. Yeah.
So Danny's our head maltster, and he happens to also be a toothpick of a guy. So I'm, of course, looking at the man ways going, okay, well, if this goes south, this is you, bud. So let me talk to you through. If we can't move this from one chamber to the next, the only way to do it is to bail it out, to let it cool down and to bail it out with pails. I don't see any other way to do it. So before we decide to give this a go, I, made some changes to the stills, fittings, and some ways to be able to fix clogs if they happen. Too technical to get into it here. But he agreed to it. God love him. And
God love.
Yeah.
You have a good confined space program in place.
Oh, no, right? We do. We've got our confined space program is we don't go into confined spaces.
Hell yeah.
We've got big goddamn stickers on everything. We've got open fermenters. We got, we don't enter tanks. It's that simple. Don't do it. This would have been the exception. So I had to buy a ventilator. I had to buy, all the things, do all of the preparation, and hoist. How do I get them out? How do I, if something goes wrong, all the, not just OSHA stuff, which is one thing, but all the, I really like Danny a lot things that I have to, worry
I want to pull
about.
this man out of my still.
Well, normally the old man can do this kind of things because OSHA doesn't apply to me. So I don't have to worry about OSHA. I mean, in terms of what I physically do. Anyways, it went flawlessly. Everything worked great. There weren't any issues at all. And the way I describe the 3-chamber still is that it operates at about 230 degrees as opposed to, whatever most columns are running. I mean, I guess it depends on the distillery and blah, blah, blah. How many seconds? 198 degrees is always the number I throw out because it's a pretty easy, place to kind of sit on in terms of meaningful thermal degradation for a long amount of time. That's the one thing that I adore about Nicole is she likes to get very technical, and she has an engineering degree and I don't. So there's certain things where she jumps in and corrects me, and rightly so. But at the same time, you have to throw some generalizations out there or the conversation just gets bogged down with, well, not everybody does the blah, blah, blah. But the important thing to understand is it operates for a very long time at 220, 230 degrees. And that lifts oils that carry aromas with it that are normally left behind in a rye mash in particular. So even when you're running a... coming off the first few liters, 70% ABV out of a 6% mash that we run, there's a massive meniscus that you can't even believe running off of the spirit safe. Now, of course, Nicole will tell you when I sent that picture out, like only distillers had any, they're like, what is going on? With that, they said, that's not bourbon. No, that's 70% alcohol. Yes. But picture what that does to pear. Obviously, the oil content of pear, peaches, and apples that we've run through are much, much higher. It looks like motor oil, clear motor oil, glycol, whatever it is you want to talk about. And of course, what that does to the palate when you're sipping on it, it completely mutes any sensation of ethanol, and it makes it so you feel like you're drinking, pear candy. Now, of course, the way I like to say it, when you get to 1001, 1002, at about 1003, oh, geez, that's 50% out, right? The ethanol
bites you in the ass.
It gets to you, obviously.
We're still alcohol.
It's still there. But up front in the nose, it's just absolutely magic. And the part we're so excited about, so we did age some in glass, which to me is necessary. Proofing for me, I'm one of those dorks that very much believes in very slow water additions.
The elevaged method. Yep.
Yeah. So even though we're off the still, I think for all of them, right around 65%, and I wanted to drop them all to 50 for various places we were going to put them. It took about 2.5 months to get it there. And of course, it's much more important because the oil content is much, much higher than in a pot still. So
you're just going to see crazy loushing if you just throw a bunch of water in it. Yeah.
I showed the guys because we'd had a. I don't think any of them had done fruit with me before, or at least the younger crew, anyways. Yeah, I took a glass of it and said, "Watch this," and I add a little water, and it's like, "Oh, hey, is that our
milk?"
And it's like, "Yeah, exactly, milk." I'm like, "Okay, see this? This is bad." So, anyways. So we did age it in glass, and to me, 6 months is plenty. I have had older eau de vies that are 1 year, 3 year, 5 years in glass. I personally cannot tell the difference between them. I can absolutely tell the difference between fresh distillate and 6 months. So that's what we did for the pear, and then the apple, the peach, and also a few barrels of the pear. We put it in number 4 char, which normally, from my experience, with a pot distillation, I'd never do that because it would completely snuff out the notes. And of course, as I'm spending all this money, the way I look at it, it's my brother's money, right? I'm just playing in his house. All these choices that I have to make when I'm working with stills that people haven't worked with in, 100 plus years in this case, who the hell am I going to call? I was, nervous about it, but it's turned out we've got peach brandy that's now about coming up on 3 years old this fall. And it's the best thing we've ever made. It's just magical. It hasn't muted down the notes. In fact, it's done the opposite because, of course, so much of peach in particular is vanilla. I mean, there's vanilla. If you've ever, worked with peach stones before or made amaretto, which we're also of course, we've got about 1,000 pounds of peach stones that are soaking in alcohol right now for the last 2 years. The amplification of the vanilla and then the wood sugars that you're getting from that number 4 char, what it's doing is it's recreating the flavor of the peach in your head. Does that make sense? So it's like you can't tell it was an oak. I don't know how else to explain it. You know what I mean? Where it's you're taking something, obviously the sugars are largely anyways, left behind in the mash after distillation. But and then I got a note from David Wondrich as we're talking about this. I'm like, I cannot believe how good this is. He said, "Oh, that makes sense," and sent me a few ads from like 1850s, 1860s where peach brandy was getting more than rye, getting more than bourbon, getting more than cognac. And as I'm, tasting this, I pulled a bung. We had our 25th anniversary in October, and I popped a bung in. And I'm so glad I can say this to you. When Nicole, quick sidetrack, when Nicole came in for the collaboration of the distillery the first time, she walked into the warehouse, looked to the left and looked to the right. Now, understand, there's about 3,000 barrels in it, and that's years of work. And I'm, it looks like a lot of whiskey to me. And Nicole said, "Is this it?" And I just love that you're in Heaven Hill right now, so you understand, what it is.
Yeah, I do.
You understand what it is I'm saying, and Nicole wasn't wrong, right? And of course, I just give her grief. I wasn't obviously insulted in the least. She was just telling the truth. But when I pulled a barrel and I pulled the bung and turned around, and it's relatively speaking full. It was hot. So it smells like rye. It smells like bourbon, maturing. I could smell the peaches behind me that were 5 feet behind me in that barrel. I couldn't believe it. I thought,
and that's really something because your dunnage style warehouse does not get crazy hot. It's not like you're like really forcing crazy evaporations. That's even blowing my mind because I know it's cool in there.
It is absolutely relative to. Again, I love that I get to pull you away from Paul and get you into and the environment in there. And I think he's one of the smartest men in the industry. I adore that man.
Paul being Paul Kletko, the founder of Few. If you guys are wondering, my former boss, we love Paul.
You can go by Paul. He's that famous, I think. But we put in the dunnage, warehouse because we're trying to mitigate the evaporation. Where a lot, a lot of distillers I know are pumping water in the air, through misters, humidifiers. And we realized really quickly that or I realized, I'm like, well, we're not going to do that. We're in Colorado. There's a water shortage. I just mentioned my brother's environmental background, and he's like, you're not going to do that, figure it out. So from there, I mean, to me, it just was kind of obvious, and it was an easy sell to my brother because earth is free. So the site that we have, there was nothing, nothing on the site. So it was just about compaction and making sure the city was happy with all the drainage and all that other kind of stuff. But we surrounded this building. It's about, 3,000-ish square feet, 3,500, something like that. I could rattle this off 10 years ago, but the old man doesn't remember now. 3,000, 5,000, something like that. And it's earthen floors with that concrete strip that you see in, Ichiro's malts or any of the Scottish distillery that's still using this. It's nice that it's inexpensive, but we circle the entire building we have big gravel, then medium gravel, then small gravel. There's drip irrigation with native plants that the city wants us there anyway. So we already have to water it. We already have to have the plants. So the idea is to trap that humidity in the building itself. And so I was hoping for single digit evaporation. When we're right now, it's still 4.2, 4.3. It's hovering around there after, I think the oldest barrel we've pulled now is 8 years old. So it really worked. It did the trick and it gives it a very unique, I don't want to use the terroir because Robin Robinson will kill me. It gives a sense of place to what we're doing. Well, he's not wrong to argue about that, in my opinion. But anyways, it's really worked well. Our spirits age very differently than they will in Kentucky. That should shock no one.
Not to mention the witchcraft of your entry proof and exit proof, which the first time you told me that, I'm like, oh, he's a wizard. He does magic.
No. Listen, I should be a better liar. When my staff asked me things like, did you mean for that to happen? And I'm like, no, I wish I was that smart. Now, the entry proof, I mean, that was something that I came across, with the Crampton and Tolman paper that the IRS put together where right after the Bottle and Bond Act, it was a survey of 31 distilleries. And this is the document that led me to the 3 chambers still that I came across, 15, 18 years ago now. And the unifying thing was everybody was in at that 100 proof. And of course, it appealed to me because, again, I think like a brewer, the easiest reason I see to do that is when it comes time for you to proof the barrel down, you're not adding much water, if at all. So to me, that's why I don't like that. Now, of course, you can make world-class whiskey in any manner of way. But to me, the idea of putting it at that 62.5 and cutting it with water where you're adding, a third, again, the volume of what's left in the barrel anyway, is water. To me, you're washing out all the flavors. You're washing out all the aromas. So that's really the way. And it doesn't hurt. It makes it a little bit safer for us to work in. That I don't feel like we're basically, working around a bunch of explodey things. And I feel a little bit better about 50%, even though the fire department doesn't treat it that way. I feel like it's a little bit safer. We fill the barrels in place. We empty them in place. And again, that's, the brewer in me where it's a stainless steel rod that we put in with a spring at the bottom. Just a little simple Todd invention. Which has a couple of advantages. One, you can start the siphon and then go find something else to do and come back, which helps because we have a very, very small crew. Makes it a little bit safer. We still have grounding and that kind of thing. We're not idiots, but it makes it so that we don't have to filter. So none of our whiskeys are filtered. because, again, as a brewer, it's like you're leaving mouthfeel behind, you're leaving flavors behind, and it costs money to filter. To me, that's always, something that's important to remember. It costs money to run that thing. The pump isn't free. The filter media isn't free. And then of course the labor isn't free. And so,
and it will affect your proof. And then you'd have to also
screw around with that all over again.
Yeah. Your exit proof is 100 and your entry proof is 100.
Isn't that weird? Now
bonkers to me.
So we finally drifted out. So that's we found for the first 5 years. We have now started bottling some things that are 8-year. And this is the other thing that's utterly baffling that I can't explain. It's like 55.12 or 3 in every single barrel that we've pulled so far this year, whether it's Maryland rye, whether it's 3-chamber, it doesn't matter. And of course, again, that, the crew here is looking at me going, do you know why it does this? And I'm like, I have no, it's one of my favorite things. And it's something that Nicole and I talked about quite a bit. We were just on the road together for a couple of weeks. That when I started, I was 25 when I was at Siebel, and I thought when I'd have the gray hair, right, and have now, Jesus, 30, whatever it is, 30 years of experience with yeast and malt and flavors and congeners and all of that stuff, that by the time I got here, I'd have it all figured out and have it all scienced up, and I'd be holding all, I'm sure you or maybe I'm telling a bit too much about myself. Like I wanted to be the best in the world when I was in my 20s. I get older and it's like, who gives a shit? I just like being one of the crew in our fun community. You get older and you get wiser, and to me, that's so much more fulfilling that I'm just another one of the gang pulling on the rope. That makes me feel much, much better than the notion that I started it with. What I want to be the best, most knowledgeable, person that you ever met. But what I was getting at, and the part that Nicole and I, completely agree on, you think that when I started, I thought it was 90% science and 10% art. And with each passing year, I think it's the other way around, maybe not quite that aggressive, but I know a lot of awfully smart people with pretty great pedigrees and diploma braumeisters and stuff that I've run across that couldn't put a good beer together to save their life. That like they understand all the science behind it, but in the end, it's what we found has gotten us to 26. And the older I get, the more we've leaned into it, the more that I've put my personality into what we're making, the more that I put my worldview and what I like into it, the more successful we've gotten. So it's why I kind of marvel at the folks and how, I guess, first of all, how lucky I am to be an owner and a distiller. I don't have to answer to anybody else but Scott. And I don't know if you know this or if I've told you this before, he's never had anything that's come off the 3-chamber still. He just doesn't care. It's completely irrelevant to him. He's running the business, running the family business, doing the books with my grandma, who's 75 now, comes in a couple days a week to help us with it. That's what gets him going, and rightfully so. But the more that we've let that creativity really kind of roll, the better the spirits are. And we've managed to have enough people who like our stuff to stay open. So, I guess, who's to argue with that? And we understood a very long time ago to not have delusions of grandeur. We're not going to be the next whatever, the next Jack Daniels, the next Jim Beam. That's not in the cards for us. And I'm just grateful my brother feels exactly the same way, that we just feel so grateful that we have enough people that I can make a pair eau de vie. The stones that I mentioned, that we're steeping, I'm allowed to do that because I know I can sell 40 cases of amaretto that will be completely unlike anything anybody's ever tasted before. And holy cow, do I feel lucky for being able to do that. So
it truly is the dream. I mean, I'm listening to what you're saying. I'm like, man, I get that, because I think younger me was like, yeah, like it would be so cool to be like master distiller of this and that and just like run this big, humongous, crazy thing. And I do help run a big, huge, humongous, crazy thing now. But man, how boring would our jobs be if like we knew everything?
Yeah.
Like, I like being surprised. I like the serendipity. I like sometimes cracking open a fermenter that I made exactly the same way as everything else, and for some mystical reason, it just smells beautiful and different than the normal stuff. And I mean, we shoot for uniformity, but I think the real magic happens in these like these questionable moments where you don't entirely understand why that happened. And I think that's what makes it endlessly fascinating. I think I would get so bored if I knew exactly everything about every little thing.
Well, and see, I think that's why we have such a fun time when we're around our fellow distillers. And the brewers that I've known for a long time are all kind of the same way, and have long ago let go of the ego. And I'm just so grateful that you and so many of the other folks have come in to the industry over the last 10 plus years, because my experience was really limited to the people who would show up at our door unannounced and would get pissed if I didn't shut the still down and help them open their distillery. And they had no interest in making anything. They were there because they thought they could make a bunch of money in this industry, which is
funny.
Very, very funny.
Funny.
a very, very funny thing. So, my brother and I learned very, very early on to can you imagine being around a bunch of those people in the conference? Well, I hadn't met Paul Letko. I hadn't met Ralph Lorenzo in person. I hadn't met, so many of these, wonderful people. And it never occurred to me early in my career. There's a thing I discussed with Lance Winters so many years ago. Now, he had Jorg. I didn't really have anybody, but it never occurred to us to call a Chris Morris or to call a Brendan Wheatley, or to even assume that they would ever field our phone call. That never once occurred to me. So it's been so nice getting into the industry a bit more, and how magnanimous and gracious and kind and warm all these people. Freddie No came out to come and see the 3-chamber still. He was just, from my perspective, you had absolutely no idea that man should be walking around with a crown on his head. And it really is one of my favorite parts about this industry, is that we're not cool kid chefs. Right. So, we're not cool kids, sommeliers. Winemakers have, definitely turned into, very, very famous, globally known people. And I kind of like that we're the beat up punk rock kids hanging out in the corner that
I can tell you, man, there were some events that I worked when I was still in Chicago, and there was one in particular. It was both a spirits and wine tasting event. So we had a bunch of spirits people there, and we had a bunch of wine people there. And God bless the wine people. I'm sure they were super, super nice, but they just kind of stuck to their tables and they didn't really talk to anyone, including themselves. Like, they didn't talk to the other wine people there. Meanwhile, the spirits people are in the corner. We all have our bottles open before we have like the onslaught of guests come in. Like, we're all trying each other's stuff. We're shooting the shit. We're like subtly trading bottles before the show even starts. Oh, we all have this bottle left over. If I have this bottle left, we can trade. Like, yeah, I'll take that home. And I love that. It makes it fun, because distilled spirits are fun. Yeah,
it's the neatest thing, seeing people doing things that I would have never thought of in a million years. And taking things into different directions and having different ideas. And it makes me so happy to see them when they are doing well, when they do find their audience and they get to express, the way that they look at the world the same way I like to. And it's why it's Usually I leave pretty energized. Anytime where I'm around a couple of distillers, it's like, well, shit, I just want to get back to my stills and get to work.
It's funny that you say that, there are other people doing so much creative stuff in our industry right now, because I think of you and I think of innovation. You were always that totem for me, especially very early on in my career. And then when the 3-chamber came out, that news broke that you were resurrecting this ancient lost still, and then the dunnage pit that you've done, and malting corn and creating whiskey entirely out of like weird malted grain that no one else is malting. Like I looked at you and I'm like, Todd is doing the crazy stuff that no one else is doing. He's saying the thoughts that no one else is saying out loud.
Well, I mean, so much of it is, I understand how lucky I am, and I take that as for the folks that aren't lucky enough to have creative freedom. I'm talking about distillers here who the owner says make this and that's the end of it, and maybe you get to do one or two special things. And of course, it's the same thing with breweries. What gets everybody up in the morning is a brewer. Well, the specialty stuff, not the, hazy IPA they've made 300 million times in a row. You get excited when you get to formulate it yourself and get into it. So I look at it from that perspective. In addition to that, it energizes the crew. So we've got peaches coming up here, right? So we've been running through malting corn. We malt the corn in the summertime because it likes warmer temperatures. So it's, from a production perspective, it's much, much easier to just do it in the summertime. They're jazzed. They're excited that they get to move but to top it off, we learn so much about distillation by making so many different things. It's just no question about it. So understanding, how to distill our gin and distilling each one of those botanicals individually, made me better at absinthe. It made me better at, we just released a sweet vermouth where instead of just fortified wine, we're adding fortified rose distillate and then pear eau de vie and peach eau de vie and trying to layer the flavors and aromas. These are all things that I'd learned over the last 25 years and trying to get better at what it is that we're doing here. And so I just feel, I just feel so tremendously lucky. I feel like I owe it to the crew here. I feel like I owe it to the other distillers who aren't lucky enough to have this complete creative freedom. And then I owe it to the people that have supported us. And so, we do releases, and we just released a part of our Fooder series this past Friday. And we had a room full of people, which is just blows me away that understand for the first 10, 15 years, we couldn't get anybody to go on a tour. Right. Nobody gave a shit about anything that we were doing. So, I mean, that's a big part of it too, that I feel so incredibly grateful that anybody cares about any of the things that you and I are talking about right now.
Yeah, I know.
That I'm like, how do I hold on to this so that these people don't go away? And how do I add, new customers to what it is that we're doing, so that hopefully we can hand this off to my 10-year-old daughter, who right now is very much a song and dance man. So I don't know how that's gonna work out with Ellie. Although this was so fun. I went to Normandy, so she's fluent in French, my daughter, and we went to Normandy to visit Camus Calvados, CAMUT Calvados. And we were in a chapter in a book together that Thad Vogler from Bar Agricole had written. So we kind of knew.
Oh, By the Smoke and Smell.
Yeah, we're both in that
Great book.
Yeah.
Great book. Yeah.
So we kind of knew each other. And I said to him, this is so great. This is such a distiller story. So the distillers are going to love this. So it's a haul. There's no way it's the middle of nowhere apple orchards in France, right? So it's not like you hop on the train and it lets you out in front of the distillery. Nope. So we had to rent vans, and my in-laws were with us. So I had a big 2 vans that I had to plan, of course, months in advance to go out there. And we pull up, and he's walking his dog, and he said, and of course the best part was, I'm like the most American looking American ever. And he immediately in English says, "Excuse me, do you have an appointment?" My heart sank. And I'm like, I'm so sorry, but I had the email ready just in case. We've been talking about visiting each other for months now. And he said, "Oh, excuse me, Mr. Leopold, I'd completely forgotten about the appointment." And any distiller that's listening to this is pull that shit, right? Where somebody's coming to visit you from Australia or from wherever the hell. And it happens to us because of the 3 chambers. So many people come to see it. And I'm like, "Oh, those guys are in to come and see you." And I'm like, "What guys?"
What?
So it made me feel better that I'm not the only absent-minded professor. But anyway, so we go into he's like, "I'm so sorry. No, everything is ready." And we came in and the vats are over 100 years old. And he very cheekily said, because my mother-in-law said, "How old are these? How old are these?" He's like, "Well, in Champagne region, the Cognac region, many of them will be well over 100 years old." He said, "This one is only 90 years old," kind of with a little twinkle in his eye. And I'm just sitting there going, it's so cool. Now, of course, I'm walking in, just having my 25th anniversary. And here I am standing in an orchard that's over 100 years old that's been making Calvados. And he's generation number 7. It was just made me weep.
Transcendental. Yeah.
It was unbelievable. So anyways, we get into the distillery and I'm asking questions. I don't speak any French. His English is good, but when you start talking about the finer technical stuff about distilling, that's when it all goes to shit. So I brought my daughter in. Now, of course, you're going to understand this from an adult perspective, but think about this from a 10-year-old. I'm going to come in and help dad with French. That's what's on her mind. I'm sitting here watching my daughter. Mr. Camus is about my age. So 2 very experienced distillers talking about the fine points of Calvados making, the fine brush strokes where I'm trying to understand what it is he's doing. And
through the translation of a 10-year-old.
Right. And, my hope, of course, is that she's going to be running a distillery in 20, 30 years. So I'm trying not to cry because here's my daughter speaking beautiful French and just charm the pants off of him, which was, just one part of the equation. But the other is she doesn't know what's happening now. But if she decides to be a distiller 20 years from now, holy shit, does she have a really wonderful. So all of this is going through my head. Well, then to top it off, I had read in Charles Neal's book on Calvados and a couple other things where they just kind of said offhandedly that Camus' great-great-grandfather got a patent on a change that he made to the still. And I'm pointing at the lower chamber with direct fire into the cider. So it's cider, it's not mash. It's turned into a cider. And then he points to the upper chamber, and I thought it was low wines or, reheating the cider as it comes into the, I don't know. I'm trying to work out what it was that was different about it.
Like it's some kind of doubler or something.
Yeah. And it's like, no, that's cider. It was a chamber still.
Oh.
It was a chamber still. Now, of course, how obviously fully bananas that here I am. I've got the daughter that speaks French, but one of a handful of people who has any idea what the hell and has run a chamber still, and he's pointing at it. It was a 2-chamber still. Now, of course, this completely blew my mind because I'd had his distillates over the years, which is why I wanted to go here. But his aromatics have always, to my nose, been so much better than the other Calvados that I'd have over the years. And of course, there you go. So he's picking up the top notes from the cider as opposed to running it through low wines to make a better brandy. And it was one of those, of course, sort of things, which kind of leads me in our meandering conversation to something else that we're doing, and then he took us over one of his defunct stills. And again, it's direct fire. And it's like, well, what is this? Oh, it says he's making vinegar. So what he was doing was applying balsamic principles to making vinegar, except for using apples instead of grapes. So in other words, make a cider. And what was happening in this defunct pot still with the head off, without a swan's neck or anything like that, he was cooking it down. So the procedure is to cook it from 12, 14, whatever the hell bricks, and concentrate it to 40 to 50%. And the best part of this is, of course, I'm looking around, there's cobwebs everywhere. It's a farmhouse, right? And I'm like, when was the last time you fired that up? And he says, I haven't had time. So this is like, the FDA's worst nightmare, right? Is he's cooking this down and then using direct fire to boil the water off, as he's doing it. Now, obviously, I could tell from tasting it and looking at it, he'd already concentrated to probably, 30 bricks. So, whatever it is that was in there for the most part isn't going to be around for long, even if it could actually do anything. And then, of course, he gave me some of the 10-year-old apple vinegar, just put a touch of it on his hand, on my hand to taste it. It was just great. So we're starting vinegar production here at Leopold Brothers.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah, it was something that we started during COVID because it was, they were shutting down liquor stores in Denver at the time. And so my brother made me put together a list. I was like, what can we do here with what we have? Vinegar was one. We have a malt house, obviously, do 1 million plus pounds a year of malt. We can make flour. We could sell flour. Maybe that's a thing.
Leopold Brothers Whoppers.
Yeah. Oh, listen.
Malted milk balls.
Well, one of the most coolest things that a lot of people don't know is that malt syrup is used in bagels, New York style bagels.
Ooh.
So we've got quite a few people when I mentioned this, that we were doing this. So in other words, you make your wort, right? So you do your mash, you make your wort, you can start it, 20 Play-Doh, whatever the hell it is you want, obviously, and then cook it down and concentrate it to that 40 or 50%. If we're making balsamic out of it, where we're going to age it for a long time, or of course you can concentrate it even further and go north of that 66 bricks. And now it's old school legal syrup that we can wind up selling. But what we're doing is multiple things. So we got what's called an acetator, and acetator is what used to be used to make picture fish and chips malt vinegar. And what it is basically, it is picture a lauter tun, where you're packing the on top of the stainless steel plates, you're packing it with beechwood chips on it. You impregnate that with acetic acid bacteria. You spray whatever it is, cider, malt beer, whatever it is that you're doing, so that it trickles through. So kind of a mixture between a lauter tun and the Lincoln County process a little bit, actually. And then you're pumping air countercurrent to it. And it's a fairly inefficient way of doing it compared to how they make it modern. And in a Schenks is the name of the German firm that has the patent on most vinegar that people have tasted. It's really industrial. It's super, super efficient. And super, super efficient means to me lifeless and boring. So picture white vinegar that you use to clean your floors, right? Like that. The slight inefficiency that you get in making it this way, it takes about 3 weeks for it to convert. And the math is roughly 5%, roughly 5% alcohol turns into 5% acetic acid, roughly. And so we're going to be making that and applying it to wine and some other things, Colorado peaches. And then that will pay the bills so that my brother, again, doesn't want to kill me while we age the balsamic stuff for years and years and years. So we're starting that this summer. But what this will also do for folks who are listening, who are used to dunder pits or muck pits or whatever word you want to argue is the correct one, the cane vinegar is very common to add 20%, give or take, to it to really load that, what I would call a bioreactor with elevated amounts of acetic acid. And so we have what I would call a muck pit out back on our property, just to keep the butyric stink from making the old man throw up. But I wasn't real happy with what we had been generating out of it. And so this kind of goes hand in hand. So we're going to make our own vinegar, our own malt vinegar, and then we're going to use that together with all the rest of the stuff that you use in a muck pit. So To me, that means infected mash to start it off, where you get that butyric acid bacteria action. Little bit of stillage, a little bit of fresh mash, and mess around with that pH to control the reaction and make what I would call blender barrels. So high ester whiskey barrels. So applying the concept of rum to whiskey to get some of those tropical notes and rum notes that, why the hell not? Basically.
No, this is really perfect because I just had Brett Steigerwalt from Lion Rum, and he presented at the Beam Institute about using rum esterification methods, but applying it to a whiskey making model. So you guys, and we talked about you on that podcast.
Well, I'm trying to think how long I think it's been, we've had it up and running since.
It's been a few years now, right?
We had it installed in 2015.
Mm-hmm.
Oh no, with the addition, I'm wrong. 2020. I'm so sorry. That was way the hell off. So for 5 years, and we've been waiting. The thing that's hard about it is it gets cool at night here, except for July and August. So our window is a little bit tighter for what it is I'm trying to do to really get those numbers up. But yeah, we're excited. So the next charge that we make with this will be with our own vinegar, because let's do it. So I'm excited to see. Yeah, he posted a note that I think on some rum forum that somebody tagged me on and said, I don't think anybody gave a shit about my presentation. And I'm of course like, no, dude, I've had 3 separate people mention it. I'm so good on you for putting that together, and thank you for spreading your knowledge.
Yeah, you and him are 2 very intelligent people when it comes to this sort of flavor drivers.
It's so much of what I've been around for a very long time, and I've come at it from so many different directions. And if there's any difference between me and a lot of the folks who say nice things, I've just been around. And I've been lucky enough to get to work with all of the things that I've mentioned over the years. And the knowledge builds up like, paint. Just keep adding another layer and another layer. And, after a while, you're kind of amazed that you know how to do a few things. I can tell you, my brother's stunned that I know how to do anything. I
love the dynamic you have with him. It will never not entertain the hell out of me.
older brother, and of course, he's really truly brilliant. He's really truly why we're open. He's real, and when people say that you're being humble, it's like, you haven't met him, have you? And they're like, no. And I'm like, okay, well then how about this? You meet him and you're like, oh, okay, now I get what you're talking about. But Sidney, you've been around long enough to know that there's an awful lot of stuff that's on the shelves where the quality isn't all that great, and they're kicking the shit out of us in sales. So the Leopold family wouldn't let any of us get an ego the way that my mom, what do you think my mom does? She dresses me down in front of the guys every chance she gets. Now, of course, happily, I'm secure enough to just, laugh along with her. But the master distiller title at Leopold Brothers, I'm not fibbing at all. It's used in air quotes, and it's usually after I do or say something stupid.
You're the man. I like that, how you described that earlier. You're the guy.
Well, when we were talking about it earlier, it was much more appropriate for Lance. Who just exudes the manness, and yeah, we were God, where were we? We were at ... in Charlotte, and it's so nice to be able to tell people about Nicole Austin, because somebody that's in marketing may not have the same weight, and to be able to explain that she's what a leader looks like, right? That and then explaining what that means and why. And that's decidedly not me. That's not my personality. I'm not wired like that. And that's not a bad thing. I'm very comfortable with who I am. But when you see folks like that are just have another gear, Fawn Weaver was like that. You know, when I finally got to meet her in person, it's just like, oh, Jesus Christ, I very much felt like I was part of the JV. I don't know how else to explain it, that she's just, her shit is so together and she's so kind and so warm. It's that thing that people would say about Bill Clinton, that he'd make you feel like you're the only person in the room. That's how she made me feel. And just watching what she does and how her Instagram makes me feel like the laziest person on the face of the earth. Watching her, here's what I'm doing at 3:30 a.m. Here's what I'm doing at 5. Here's what I'm like, good God. I'm just sitting there lazily, sipping on coffee, trying to wake up. And she's already on her 4th media interview. But it's been so fun getting to share with people what Nicole looks like to us smaller distillers. And then now, of course, you're on that same path. And it's so fun to watch because
that is the kindest thing. I don't know if I'm quite on Nicole's
you
path.
Are very
I'm just
much,
happy to be here,
I
man.
know that you are, and I know that we all are, but understand this is how, and part of it too, it's the not enough men have imposter syndrome. I certainly get it hard sometimes. I get frustrated when I see it play out with women in distilling in particular, and playing out with people that I'm like looking at. The Maggie Campbell, great example, where it's like, 50 times more than any other younger distiller who happen to be men. And it bothers me that you don't know that. And it bothers me that you don't, I don't know how to say it, but my point is, it's really, really fun to see you on that exact same path where
Thanks, Todd.
You have the same intellectual hunger. You have that same humility. You have that same excitement over learning about our really beautiful industry. And there's a lot about it that's shitty, and there's a lot about it that sucks. And I'd like to think all of us are working on trying to make that a little bit better. But when you get to see this from the sidelines and then watch you, Sydney's at Heaven Hill, that surprises me not at all. And to watch you, there she is in her hard hat, and she's running a division, and she's the supervisor, and it's so, I don't know. I'm just so pleased watching your career advance, and it's fun to look at it from the perspective of the old man here. So,
well, that is the nicest thing that anyone has said to me in a very long time. So I'm going to get off this podcast and I'm going to go cry when we're done here. So thank you. But seriously, I mean, you and Leopold Brothers has been such a guiding light for me, for other craft distillers. You guys just set such an extraordinary standard. And like any time I drink anything from you, whether it is the gin that I'm sipping on right now, or the Maryland rye that I've had at home, or the brandy that I'm going to get my hands on one of these days, it inspires me, and it reminds me like why the fuck that like I started this, why I fell in love with it. And you're the sounding board, you're the mirror that like I always like go to if I'm like, man, like I'm just doing the same thing over and over and over again. I'm like, yeah, but there are things in this world that like are really beautiful and extraordinary. And, you were the maker of some of them. And that's just. Well,
but again, that, kind of leaning on Nicole, the things that she's done where she released a bourbon out of Dickel, and the things that she's done of, completely changing the palette of Dickel and taking it in a new direction. All of these things are very much in your future. And I don't know, I just think that you should be very excited for it, and do like the rest of us. Learn as much as you can, get knocked on your ass, realize you don't know a goddamn thing about distillation, and then show up to work. But you put it perfectly, where the not knowing is what makes it so fun, because you want to figure it out. It makes your career like a detective novel. That same line of thinking is what led me to the 3-chamber still. Why did this disappear? Why did nobody, what the hell happened to this thing? Why was everybody using it? Why was, old Fitzgerald was bragging about it. This is before Prohibition, before Stitzel Weller. So this was the whiskey that made Pappy Van Winkle famous, that he was selling before he opened up Stitzel Weller later. And I got curious. And so we're all kind of the same mind. And I'm sure you'll notice, the biggest fans that we have are kind of like How It's Made nerds. That show, How It's Made, right? We're just, we're curious minds. We're curious about the world. We're curious about flavors. And it's all bound up in community, which is why I'm so excited that you're part of the Kentucky community and the pride that everybody has down there, for their production. And it's, warranted. And I know for some of the distillers that aren't in Kentucky, or the smaller distillers, can get frustrated sometimes at Kentucky and Tennessee distillers get all the press, but they earned it. They're well over 100 years into it, and we just gotta put some work in. And I'd like to think we're all gonna get there. And that reminds me, by the way, Lisa Roper Wicker, if she's listening to this, I sent her a bottle of the vermouth and insisted she share it with you. So that's next on deck for you. And that
Fantastic.
was Steve Mathiasen. So Steve Mathiasen, he was a Beard Award finalist in 2019. We were finalists in 2020. So somehow that made it so that we were aware of each other. And he sent me his.
You say that so casually. I was a Beard final. God.
Well, listen. So
it will never not be crazy to me.
Well, we know
in like the best way. Like, God, what a James Beard Award.
I'd like to point out we never won the thing, and that year we were finalists with Lance, and we did a Zoom call together. It was so great. So we were on a Zoom call with Lance, and we're all laughing because when you make the finals, they send you like an Oscar grab bag. And sometimes it's super cool. Like one was the McElhaney family won a Beard. It's the grab bag is from former Beard Award winners. And so the McElhaney family is who does Tabasco. And I don't know, at our place, hot sauce is like currency. If you walk by in a tour, you'll see like 20 different hot sauces. Mm-hmm. They sent us a gallon jug of hand-selected Tabasco. Isn't that crazy? And
that's how you know you've made it.
Well, no, that's exactly it. We're like, we don't give a shit if we win this award or not. This is the award. We got some teas, these other lovely things. Well, for 2020, COVID happened. So that year, the grab bag was a bunch of tchotchke and cans of White Claw. It was all White Claw. So to understand why this was such a slap in the face, they shut it down before they gave the award. So we made the final five. We were supposed to go to Chicago, right? And that's where you'd get dressed up and all that stuff. And so my wife, who's a total foodie, is excited to meet all these people. I have no idea who they are. But, all excited to go. And so the joke we like to make is that 2020 was the year that St. George and Leopold brothers didn't lose the James Beard Award, right? Because that's as close as where they killed the category. So the winemaker, distiller, brewer category is a national award for all three, and you only pick one. We're never going to get a chance to win it. And of course, the most important thing, if they do finally come back and have it, is that Lance needs to hurry up and win the damn thing, so that the rest of us won't feel like a fraud for winning it before he does. But they have to bring the award back. But yeah, White Claw. That was our
White Claw.
That was the here's your what do they call it? Runner-up gift, like a home game version of the Beard Award, and a case of White Claw. It was really funny.
That is pretty funny. The Beard Award people, if you're listening, count your days.
Yeah. They, in their defense, they had far more important things to deal with in 2020
but White Claw.
than worrying about this stuff. But the part that was kind of hard was they started announcing winners, and then they just stopped. And I've had a couple people say, oh, they know who won that. And I'm like, oh, God, what a bummer that we didn't get, some sort of. But anyway, so Mathiasen, I'm sorry, he reached out. He sent us a bottle of his Cabernet Sauvignon. He was Food and Wine winemaker of the year one year. Total cult following. He's one of those you can bleep this out, assholes who can sell every last bit of his wine in a wine club, and he has a wait list that's 1,000,000 miles long, right? So he's one of the best winemakers on earth. He sends me his Cabernet and says, make a vermouth out of this, which is just completely terrifying. But his bottles are on the shelf for $70 a pop. This is world-class Cabernet. And so I put it all together. And again, as I mentioned, pair eau de vie peach, it's like he's sending his A game. I got to, put the best distillates, the best possible thing I can think of to put it together. And it really turned out, I was so happy with it. But at the same time, picture how terrified I was sending this bottle to them. And it was, so we went and did the launch, and we were at ABV in San Francisco. They're doing the launch, and he did his talk first because, of course, I'm no fool. Let him open, and then I do the end. And at the end of it, we're talking to each other. He's like, Todd, it never occurred to me, because, of course, I'm saying the same story I'm telling you here, which is, how scared would you be if Steve Mathiasen sent you his wine and basically implied, "Don't mess it up, kid"? And he said to me, Todd, I got to be honest, it never occurred to me that it wasn't going to be anything but great. And I can assure you that there were many sleepless nights of, sending it out to him and have him say, Todd, you don't understand our wine at all, because I know nothing, and I mean nothing about wine. I've never studied it. I'd never worked with grapes.
I can't afford to go down that rabbit hole, so I prevent myself from going down the rabbit hole.
That's right. Yeah. And so I was just doing the best that I could. And the obvious approach to me was you make his wine the central, call it the Christmas tree. And then I just hang ornaments on his Christmas tree. And so
I love that.
Where I'm the top notes in the aroma and the finish, and he's the dead center mid palate, which is how it, to me anyways, how it tastes. And then I had a couple of reviews where they said that, where, oh my God, you can taste the Cabernet. And I was, of course, But what a wonderful, wonderful experience that was, working with him and getting to go out in Napa. And this is total distilling. As you can tell, I'm probably going over by several months here, talking too much. But when I went to his vineyard, it was the first time I'd been to Napa. And it's all biodynamic. It's all organic. And he's, of course, he and his wife, they both have master's degrees in viniculture out of UC Davis, right? I've never taken even, wine for dummies. And here I am standing in front of his vineyard, and he's explaining all of this stuff to me about wine for the very first time. And what he said, this is such a production thing that Sydney, you're going to understand immediately. He said, by the time the season is over, from start to finish, we will have touched every plant 7 times in 7 passes. And you could tell by the way he said it, he wishes to God it was 6. Right? You know what I'm talking about? Where it's like,
I do. Yeah.
Where for the floor malting, the last day, the rootlets are growing at an accelerated rate on the very, very last day. Right. Mm-hmm. So the first day you set the floor, you rake it once, you walk. The second day, you rake it twice, you can walk. Third day, okay, now it's a problem. Not only is it providing more resistance, but you've got to rake it 4 or 5 times, and you wish it was 3. I called my wife that night. I hadn't had imposter syndrome that bad in a long time, where I'm realizing, as a distiller, this is not the same as farming, Pud. So I'm very much feeling like, a lazy, entitled distiller who's got silos full of the work that he did, right? In the farming. And I just, hit a button in the auger, drops it into the steep tank for malting. It made me feel incredibly lazy.
But you still malt. You still run a malt floor. Like, you're still so agricultural. What are you talking about?
But it's not quite as intensive. And it was a wonderful learning experience. And then the best part of the whole thing, by the time he was done showing me, we're together for maybe 3 or 4 hours between the fields, and then him walking him through his winemaking process and maturation and what temperatures and why and all that kind of stuff. both of us said 2 or 3 times, I never thought of it from that perspective. So we both walked away from the collaboration kind of understanding flavors and aromas and things like ester formation in different ways, because we're making different things with a different set of tools. So it was really the whole thing, people ask why we do so many collaborations. You have any idea how much I've learned from Nicole? I would have never thought of blending ever. I started as a brewer. So to me, it's like, here's my whiskey. I hope you like it. Like, it would never have occurred. We did singles for years. We were just doing 1 barrel at a time, but because I thought, well, we're so small, what else could I do? And she completely changed my mindset as to how to look at these things and how you can make whiskey better, and how how valuable of a tool that was. And that would have never happened if I didn't get a chance to work with her. And so that's why we keep doing these collaborations, and so that we're always learning. We're always, picking up a few things here and there. And it's wonderful working with like-minded people. Like-minded in the sense that we may have the same goals, but we have completely and utterly different ways of looking at things, which is why I just, adore St. George so much, that when we get a chance to be in the same room, we're just laughing because, first of all, their choices and their spirits taste like their personalities to me. And I would never in a million years have come up with the ingredients that they used and how they use them. Right. Mm-hmm. And they, of course, are saying the exact same thing, that they would never have thought to use, pisco on our absinthe, for instance, was one of the things that we did, or, what he did with, the terroir gin, which I think is just so absolutely beautiful.
That was the inspiration for my terroir inspired gin.
Yeah, those choices that they made would never occurred to me. And it's what makes our industry so beautiful. It's why I steal Lance's quote all the time. If you're going to release a spirit, have something to say. Don't just release it just to release it. And so, I can tell you, and I've told, Lance and Dave this, they've been pushing us for years because, of course, we're in the California market. I know that the spirits that we're putting together, we're sending to that California market. And I don't want them to say this is shit. I don't want them to think anything but wow. And that makes you, or it certainly made me over the, 20 plus years of kind of following behind on their coattails, of wanting to make sure that we can hold our head up high. And of course, the same thing applies to all the folks at Heaven Hill and all the folks at Maker's Mark. And you want to make sure that you can be one of the crew that's hanging out, having a dram at some, distiller's dinner or something out in Kentucky. And if you run into them, you don't have to run and hide in the bathroom because you feel like a fraud. You know what I mean?
Oh, that's cool. I love that you guys, Leopold Brothers and St. George, I love that you guys are friends and collab, because I put the two of you in the same box in my head, like this upper echelon, like dream level operation that produces these gorgeous, gorgeous things that I love. So that makes my heart feel real happy. Well, to know that you guys are.
They're just about the nicest people that you ever want to meet. One quick story, if I haven't shared this before, the day that I met Dave was at a place called Camino. Mm-hmm. And it was really one of those OG. Thad Vogler, that wrote The Smoke and Smell, was running their bar program, and they had me out for a dinner. And there had to have been, there was a packed house. So I don't know what that means. 70 people, 100. To me, it felt like 1,000. But it was a fairly big restaurant, and it was full. And first of all, I made the mistake. I'd never been, it was my first time to San Francisco. I'd never been before. I'm a Colorado kid. I hadn't been out and about. And the first thing out of my mouth when I stand up to say, greet everybody before the dinner is, this is my first time in San Francisco. Well, the restaurant was in Oakland. So the opening, the opening thing I got was a big groan. And I'm, of course, like immediately recoil. And I'm looking over and I'm like, I'm so sorry. We've been over bridges 4 times today, and I don't know where we are.
I don't know where I am.
And they of course all started laughing, which was much better than them being offended. So I'll take it. But we were talking beforehand. I didn't know who he was, and then eventually I got to, he introduced himself, and I'm just like, oh my God, and said the same things you're saying to me that been. Mm-hmm. Trying to keep up with you guys all these years as best as I can. And, I made that same comment about how I love the community and that we're just kind of this little bunch of punk rock kids that the, food and beverage industry just doesn't understand and doesn't give a shit about. And I said, it's really hard to get an ego when you're buying your distilling equipment from Bed Bath & Beyond. And Dave did not smile and did not miss a single beat and immediately said they have the best strainers. And I said, yes, that's where I get my strainers for the various, yes, right? So, that's my first introduction to St. George and Dave Smith. How can you not fall in love with those guys, right? Mm-hmm. That it's just, we call ourselves professionals, but we're buying our equipment next to pillows and whatever the hell else they sell at Bed Bath & Beyond.
Well, now it's solidified that Dave is now that I have interviewed, now that I've had you on the podcast and interviewed, now it's going to be Dave. Now I got to go start harassing him too.
He is just, and he comes from that winemaking background. And so he has just a ton of knowledge that I've never acquired. And, who doesn't want to hear about what they may be making next? Because they're obviously always working on some cool stuff. And he's just a good man, another pioneer in the industry that is, leading the way for all the rest of us suckers. And you should send him a note. I would imagine you have him on speed dial. And if you don't, I'll take care of that.
We did just emailed last week. So
there you go. Get him on next. Get him on next. He'll be a much better guest, I assure you.
Oh, stop that. I want to thank you so much for coming on today and talking. You and I can talk for hours. And that is why I was so looking forward to this conversation, because A, I get to talk about the things that I love, which are the things that you make. And B, I just get to catch up with you. And I wish I could see you more, because you're one of my most favorite people on this planet at this point. So again, thank you so much for coming on today. And I think that's a great place for us to kind of wrap up the show, So before we sign off, just a quick reminder, as we talked about at the beginning of the show, chillers are really important. And for more than 30 years, G&D Chillers has had the proven solution for distilleries. And you should visit them today at gdchillers.com for all of your chiller needs. And if you've enjoyed this podcast, you can go to spiritsanddistilling.com and you can sign up for our free newsletter, which features new stories every week from some of the best writers and distillers in the distilling world. Todd, if people want to learn more about any of the super fucking cool things that you work on, where can they go? How can they dig a bit deeper?
Oh, I guess we're most active on Instagram. I'm happy to say I've graduated away from having to run any of the social media stuff, because I'm Gen X and social media is hard for me. Instagram is really the easiest way, or Facebook, or, we're talking to a bunch of distillers. Send us an email. I'm happy to, answer any questions or, help you with any personal problems you might be having, right?
Yeah. They got a great website too, with a lot of really cool information about the 3-chamber still. If you're curious more about how it works, the history behind it, it is such a cool, fascinating piece of equipment that Todd is responsible for helping resurrect. And now there's several of them across the country. Which
is pretty exciting.
Mm-hmm. You've resurrected this whole distilling style.
There are worse things to be known for. Yeah, I'll take it.
This is true. Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for listening in today. Todd, I just adore you. We will be back in another 2 weeks for another in-depth distilling conversation. Thank you so much for joining us today. Cheers.
This podcast has been brought to you by Spirits and Distilling for those who love to make and drink great spirits. Join our free newsletter today at spiritsanddistilling.com for pragmatic, technical, and creative distilling stories in your inbox every week. Sign up now at spiritsanddistilling.com or click on the link in the show notes.